The Andy Pollin Show on ESPN 630, the sports capital.
This is Orioles preview as the Orioles continue their series with the Dodgers as they won last night 3-2, and they have now pulled to within a game of the Yankees, who were playing here last night, and they lost to the Nationals 4-2, so that race continues. And, you know, as you look forward in this last month plus of the season, got a few days left in August and then the month of September, the big question about the Orioles is pitching, and it's starting pitching and relief pitching. And you may look at Mike Elias and what he did at the trade deadline and say he didn't do enough. They've just had an unbelievable number of injuries to the rotation. And what you need when you get to the playoffs is three pitchers. And certainly you can count on the ace of the staff, Corbin Burnes, who has made 26 starts this year. He's been reliable. He's been everything that you would have hoped for in an ace. They bring him in. He's 12-6, 3.28 ERA. His contract is up at the end of the season, so they'll have to make a decision then. But by and large, he has been a huge addition to the team. Your number two starter, arguably, is a guy who wasn't even on the roster at the beginning of the year. Played over in Japan and wound up in the minor leagues. They bring him up, and he's been a godsend because they did not think they would need him, but he's become really their number two starter. That's Albert Suarez, who has also managed to make 26 starts this year. The best ability is availability, and he's been able to do that and go out and take the ball, and his numbers are also excellent with an ERA in the threes. Then Dean Kramer, who is, like most of their starters, struggled with injuries, has given them back-to-back good starts. He's made 19 appearances this year, and while his ERA is a little higher than you'd like it to be, 4.31, he has been able to take the ball in the last two outings and give them innings and give them quality starts. Now, the bullpen, you know, that's really where they gambled and it didn't work out. They bring in Craig Kimbrell, and they think he's going to be the guy. And Kimbrell, while he has been effective at times, and his save numbers are not terrible, he's got 29 saves, he has given up some big hits and some big runs in pressure situations. So a guy with a great name comes in, Sir Anthony Dominguez, and while he has been effective at times, they had two games against the Mets last week in a three-game series that ended with walk-off home runs against Sir Anthony Dominguez. So that's where we are with this team, and that has got to improve if they are going to be able to make a run in the playoffs. They're going to be a playoff team. That's the thing. You know, there's no really reason to worry about that. They got one of the best records in baseball, but it's when you get to the playoffs, and if you have three pitchers that you can count on, three starting pitchers, and we saw this with the Nats 5 years ago. If you have three starters who can also come in relief, that's really how you get through the playoffs these days. Now, it may have cost Steven Strasburg the rest of his career. We don't know. I laugh. I shouldn't be laughing, but he got $245 million after that. And Patrick Corbin hasn't been the same either since that series. But anyway, we're moving on to the Orioles as they continue their series with Los Angeles tonight. Matt Weyrich from the Baltimore Sun is with us, and I've just been yapping about the pitching this year and the number of injuries that they've had. And now as we head into the final month of the regular season, what's your feel on what they have on the pitching staff, and is that going to be enough once they get into the playoffs?
Yeah, certainly their depth has been tested this year. A ton of injuries. Guys like Kyle Bradish, John Means, Tyler Wells, all out for the season. Guys that they were counting on for not just valuable innings, but especially for Bradish and Means, two guys that they had penciled into their playoff rotation when the season began. So they've had to backfill through depth, whether it be pitching prospects, whether it be trade deadline moves. And as the dust settles with the guys that they have right now and the guys they expect to come back from the injured list, I think that if they're able to get everybody who is hurt right now, like Grayson Rodriguez, like Danny Coulombe, who is a key cog in the back end of their bullpen, Zach Eflin, who is hoping to return from the injured list and make it a minimum stint here by the end of the weekend. If they're able to get those guys back, I think that they do have a good enough pitching staff to make a deep run. It's just really walking this tightrope right now with all the injuries that they've had. You know, one setback, one hurt elbow, something like that I think would put a serious damper on their World Series chances.
Do you agree with me that once you get to the postseason, it's really about three pitchers because of the days off? I mean, I liken what happened with the Nats 5 years ago. They relied on three to get through, not just starting, but in relief. And if that's the case, aside from Corbin Burns, who would be the other two that maybe you could count on in that kind of situation?
Yeah, I think certainly if you have the lineup to carry you to wins, and I think the Orioles lineup, when it's clicking on all cylinders, is able to do that, especially considering they hit home runs. And, I think that a lot of people look at a lineup that lives and dies by the home run as a problem. But if you look at teams that have won the World Series in the last 10 years, more often than not, they are home run hitting teams. And, the Orioles don't walk a ton, and that's been pointed out as a problem. But, I think that they certainly have the kind of lineup that does succeed and has a proven track record of succeeding in the playoffs. So I think you can. If the Orioles were to have their top three arms available, certainly it would be Corbin Burns at the top, but Grayson Rodriguez would be their number two, and Zach Eflin is probably their number three at this point. I know he's not necessarily a sexy name, but he has been fantastic since coming over from the Tampa Bay Rays at the trade deadline, and I think he's just somebody who you can kind of rely on to give you 6 innings, 3 runs every time he goes out there. So with those three plus the back end of the bullpen, maybe 1 or 2 names emerge as guys you can depend on, I think they have a chance.
What's the story with Eflin? He's on the injured list now, isn't he?
Yes, he's got shoulder inflammation. It was something that cropped up after his last start. He left the 87 pitches and was feeling some fatigue, and I think it kind of developed into that. But he's not going to even go and make a rehab start. They're hoping he can just jump right back into the rotation.
Oh, that's big. Okay, and then Kramer has given them a couple of big starts since he returned as well. So maybe that it's not what you have in the middle; it's how you finish, and we'll see what they have at the end of the year. That's going to be big for them. You mentioned the home runs. They got their 201st last night with a couple of them. That's the first time they've gone over 200 since 2019, and they're only behind the Yankees in home runs. Is this a team that is geared that way? I mean, it's that's the old Oriole way where the Earl Weaver play for the big inning, the big 3-run inning. Is that pretty much the way they play this year?
That has kind of been the way they've been going the last 2 months. I mean, it's interesting because last year they really didn't have a ton of home runs, and they were a grind out at bats, move the line type of offense, and obviously it worked out really well for them to win 101 games and won the AL East. But this year, as their prospects have kind of developed some of that power, they've shifted more to be that type of lineup that relies on the home run ball really a lot more than they'd probably like to. I think they'd like to be drawing some more walks. They'd like to be moving the line a bit more and clogging the base pass. And I think that we've seen a bit inconsistency from their offense over the last couple of months because when their home runs aren't coming, their offense really just isn't putting up a whole lot of numbers. I mean, last night in their 3-2 win over the Dodgers, all 3 of their runs were scored on 2 home runs, and they weren't really able to do much else. So it's certainly something I think they're working to improve. And I think if they're able to get Jordan Westburg back, who is out right now with a broken hand, in time for the playoffs, that is going to be huge. He hits homers, don't get me wrong, but I think he's somebody who goes to the opposite field the other way and completely changes the outlook of their lineup when he's right in the middle of guys like Gunnar Henderson and Anthony Santander.
Talking to Matt Weyrich, who covers the Orioles for the Baltimore Sun here on Orioles Preview, ESPN 630. I look at this again this year the same way I looked at it last year. Adley Rutschman, you want to have him behind the plate for that pitching staff. He's great in handling the pitchers. On the other hand, we got a game, well, it's not here tonight, but here in Washington, it's got 101 degrees. It's, still hot. Do they keep him behind the plate, or do they use him a lot as a DH in the last month of the season, even as they, battle the Yankees for the first place?
Yeah, I think they've been using him, honestly, as a DH a lot all season just to try and keep him fresh. I think they do really like using James McCann against lefties to kind of give him a day off without actually giving him a day off, keeping his bat in the lineup. He also hits lefties a lot better, so being able to hit him out of the DH spot against lefties, I think, puts him in the best position to succeed offensively, which is something that they're really trying to do right now, is get him going. He's not really been the Adley Rutschman that he was over the first 3 months of the season and years prior. Over the last 6 weeks, I think his struggles have kind of corresponded with the struggles of the lineup as a whole. But they're only facing righties out here in Los Angeles, so certainly possible that Rutschman catches all 3 games. They had a day off on Monday, so being able to come back and no day-to-night games or night-to-day games or anything like that to kind of mess with his routine. I think it's possible he catches all three, especially considering McCann. I can't even recall the last time he started against a righty. So we'll see. We'll see. I think it's certainly in play.
All right. Last thing before I let you go, they won the division last year. They had a week off, and then they got swept by Texas. Given that, how important is it to win the division this year?
I think it's super important when you consider just the places they'd have to go. I mean, right now with Kansas City taking the lead in the AL Central, potentially you have to go to KC for a playoff series, and as a lower seed. And we look at the home road splits for Kansas City this year. That is not a place I would want to be as a playoff team, especially considering the way that this Kansas City team is made up. I wouldn't want to go there. I certainly wouldn't want to go to New York either. To have to play the Yankees on the road with all of the drama and the history that they have this year. So, the layoff is a thing. No, don't get me wrong. It's certainly affected teams in the past. I think the Nationals, I grew up around D.C. watching the Nats, and I think the Nats benefited in 2019 from some teams having some layoffs. Being a team that was able to just ride the hot hand, get hot right at the end, and just basically not stop playing through the end of October. There is something to be said for that, but I still, even with that said, I think I'd still rather be the team that has won the division, the team that gets the bye, eliminate the chance of being knocked out in the wild card round, and you just try to manage that layoff as much as you can.
Good stuff. Thank you, Matt. Good to talk to you.
No problem. Thank you. Matt
Weyrich, Baltimore Sun. Tim Kurkjian of ESPN next.
The Andy Pollin Show on ESPN 630, the sports capital.
This is Orioles preview on ESPN 630, brought to you by Sprinkler Fitters Local 669, saving lives and protecting property for over 100 years. Great pleasure once again to talk to Tim Kurkjian. You know him from ESPN, but also he's involved in a new venture which combines two of his greatest loves, baseball and his son Jeff. They do a podcast, Is This a Great Game or What?, which is also the title of a book that Tim wrote some years ago. I have enjoyed listening to parts of it and some of the stories that come out. It sounds like you guys are having a great time doing it.
Yeah, Andy, it's a dream of a lifetime for old Pop-Pop here. He gets to work with his son, and he's so good. He's so polished on the air, but he's not a baseball guy like me.
Yeah.
So it works out perfectly. Instead of us, going back and forth and arguing about baseball things, it's not what we do. He knows a lot about everything else in the world, and I don't know anything other than baseball, basketball, and sitcoms from the 60s. That's all I know. So we're a good pair. We work well together, and I'm so bad, Andy, at technology, as you probably know, that I drive from, Gaithersburg to Philadelphia every Monday in order to tape the show. Just in case anything goes wrong, I have a genius in the room to fix it.
Oh, well, that's good, and at least he doesn't live in Los Angeles because it take you 3 days to get there. So that's that's a good thing.
And he has a daughter who's 1 year old, so I get to go see McKinley Kurkjian once a week also now in my trips to Philadelphia to do the podcast.
Oh, that's fabulous. I got a 2-year-old granddaughter, and I can only tell you probably know this, it gets better. So congratulations on that.
Well, thank you.
One of the things that and this is the thing about doing podcasts, and you've been a guest on them for years and years, and I've done some of it. Tony's show is a podcast that we turn into a radio show here, but you have the time to stretch out and tell stories. And, you as a beat writer got to cover two of the great characters as managers, Don Zimmer with the Texas Rangers, and, of course, Earl Weaver with the Orioles, and Tommy Lasorda was around at that time. It just seems to me that, especially in the manager spot and maybe even players as well, there aren't as many characters anymore. And is that just coincidence, or is that because of the way the game is played now?
Right, and that's the way the media is played now also. I mean, Andy, you remember this. I used to sit next to Earl Weaver for literally 45 minutes at a time, sometimes an hour, sometimes just the two of us. before a game sitting on the bench watching BP.
Yeah.
Well, those days are so far over because now, and again, this is just the way the world works. You get to the ballpark, clubhouse is open for 45 minutes. Then the manager goes in and speaks to all the media in a very antiseptic interview room, and that's sometimes all you can get from the manager. So, and plus we've taken away the value of the manager. It's not what it used to be. And the manager sometimes isn't even in charge of the running of the game anymore. So we've lost a lot of character out of our managers. And frankly, 67 years old, I miss it. I miss the manager being in charge of the team, being the spokesman for the team on all things. And I think the industry has allowed this to happen, and it saddens me.
How about the players, too? I mean, where have you gone, Joe Charbonneau, Doug Rader, players like that? Do we have those guys in baseball now?
Well, they're hard to find, Andy, and naturally they're a little bit afraid to come out and speak because the media is everywhere. Twitter and whatever we call it these days is everywhere. And no matter what you say, you're going to offend someone. You're going to get in trouble. And I certainly understand how that works. But players just don't find the need to be colorful anymore. It just doesn't do them very much good. And my second book, the one you referenced, This Great Game or What, I had just a whole chapter on humor. And I go back and look at it, and it's all the guys who played in the early 80s.
Yeah.
That's when humor was allowed in the game. It's just not the same today.
No, absolutely. We're talking to Tim Kurkjian, Hall of Famer, and a participant with his son in a podcast called Is This a Great Game or What? Couple of pitching things that being talked about now with all the arm injuries and the way the game is played. One, a 6-inning minimum for starters, and even this, that there would be a maximum on velocity of 95 miles an hour. If you go over that, it's a ball. Thoughts on both of those?
All right. Well, the second one is not happening, Andy, because you can't tell someone to not be really good or not try really hard. It just isn't right. It's like saying someone you can't score 20 points a game or you can't get into the lane 10 times in a row because that's illegal. That doesn't make any sense. So we're not going to see that. We do have to bring a new value to the starting pitcher. We've lost the value of the starting pitcher. Again, Andy, I'm 67. I grew up watching Jim Palmer against Sandy Koufax in the World Series and Bob Gibson against Jim Lonborg and Bob Gibson against Eddie McClain. Well, those days don't exist anymore, and we have to get it back. But there's got to be a better way to do it than saying you have to pitch 6 innings or 100 pitches or 4 earned runs or more, and then we can take you out because you're pitching us out of the game, or, of course, you get hurt. I'm all in favor of trying something to give the value back to the starting pitcher because the industry has allowed this to happen, and it needs to come back. But just a strict, starters got to go 6 innings, I don't see that working either.
Yeah, and I don't as well. And, I'm with you on that. I have a picture in my basement of Sandy Koufax dancing off the mound after beating the Yankees in the 1963 World Series. When was the last, you probably know this, when was the last time we had a pitcher finish a World Series game? Has that happened in recent years?
That's a really good question, Andy. I should know that. I think we go back to, I know we're not going all the way back to this, but Jack Morris pitched a 1-0 shutout in 10 innings in 1991. And the thought of that happening in Game 7 of the World Series, that one pitcher pitches the whole game, a 10-inning game, that simply isn't going to happen anymore, and that's really a shame. Because I think if we pressed these guys, Garrett Cole, Paul Skeens, and others, they would want to go finish the game, but they're not allowed to finish the game. And that's, again, what the industry has created.
Wow, that's 33 years ago. You should realize. So, yeah, there's that. Since this is Orioles preview, let me hit you with this real quick. Do they have the pitching? I was just talking to one of the beat writers for the Orioles, Matt Weyrich, and about the idea that once you get into the postseason, you're more reliant on 3 rather than an extended rotation. Do you think they have enough to win a World Series with the staff that they have right now?
Well, the staff they have at the moment, I'm going to say no. But if Zach Eflin comes back, which it looks like he will in early September or soon, and if Grayson Rodriguez comes back in the next few weeks, yes, they have enough starting pitching to get to and win the World Series. But I say that, Andy, because so many other really good teams out there, the Phillies, the Dodgers, the Yankees, they've all hit terrible stretches. I just don't see a dominant team out there right now that you just look at and say, that's the prohibitive favorite. We don't even have a team with 80 wins yet.
Yeah.
And it's almost September. So it just shows you how difficult it is with the parity we have in the game today. So the Orioles have as good a chance as anyone else. However, they're going to have to get that rotation healthier than it is right now.
Yeah, and they have been probably hit as hard as any team in baseball. Would that be fair to say with that?
Yes, it's unbelievable what has happened to their rotation. They started the season 6 deep with major league starting pitchers. And with all their injuries, they went down to like 2. And now they got to get some guys healthy in order to have a rotation that can really do some damage in October.
Always great to talk to you, and you can remind your son that 2 men who are related with a last name that starts with a K just signed a $100 million podcast deal, the Kelsey brothers. So best of luck to the Kurkjian men in that as well.
Well aware, Andy, and trust me, we will never get that close. We just want to make a little money. No. This isn't about money. This is about a father and son doing something together. It's so good.
Very good. And really enjoying it. Thanks so much for the time, Tim. I'll talk to you soon.
Okay, Andy. See you. Bye.
That's Tim Kurkjian. Orioles preview on ESPN 630 is presented by Sprinkler Fitters, Local 669, saving lives and protecting property for over 100 years. I want to thank Tim very much for coming on, Matt Weyrich, Isaac Harris for running the show, and all of you who listened. We've got Bram Weinstein coming up next, and I will see you back here tomorrow morning at 9 a.m.